Welcome, everyone, to Awesome Truth, a wrestling book club. I'm your host, Steve Semino, and with me, as always, is my co host, Walt Schwenk. Hey, Walters.
Hello, Steven. How's it going?
My friend, it is going very well. We are back on Awesome Truth, and today, Walt, we are watching Table for Three. Finally, we dipped our toe in the series Table for Three, which is a pretty much buried at this point, but formerly high profile WWE Network series where literally three people would sit at a table and they'd use that as an excuse to talk about a topic, as like a mini televised podcast of sorts. And somehow, in the years and years of doing this show, while we've never ever talked about it,
And of
I
course, if
think.
I'm pretty sure, pretty confident you're right there. And of course, what better way to dip into Table 3 than the recently released, not released, Our Truth,
Yeah,
uh,
Ron
who
Killings.
who was featured on an episode of this. So let's talk about Table 3. Let's talk about Our Truth. Let's talk about recent events. Let's talk about relevant wrestling things.
Yes, I
Not
mean,
Table 3.
well, did we say let's talk about Our Truth and do a quick search and say, oh, he was on Table for Three 3 years ago? Let's talk about that. Maybe we did. That sounds like something we might have done. But you know what? We watched a thing on Peacock now, and it had Our Truth in it. And like you said, is that an excuse to now discuss him? Sure, as it should be, because he's in the news for better or worse. We're not going to get too in the weeds of what exactly happened because I don't think Walt nor I reads the sheets too consistently and has that much of real insight into what could have happened, nor do we need to join in that conversation, because obviously what did happen was Truth either got let go or got his contract not renewed. Somebody got upset, probably internally, but maybe a little externally played a role. And he's back now for what seems like probably just one last little run because the guy is 53 years old. So I don't think he has a ton of time left anyway. But it seems like they're going to let him go out on his own terms.
Yeah, I think this table of for 4-3, not of three, table 4-3.
Correct.
Okay. Um, I I think this kind of, which we'll get into the actual episode, but I think this definitely just like reminded me of like why this character, this wrestler, this performer is very charming,
Mm-hmm.
and why he resonates with people, because this isn't like Daniel Bryan getting fired in like 10 years ago and everybody like the audience like revolting. This is like different. This is like fair. This is very different. So
Yeah, this is not in his prime talent not being recognized and pushed aside. And so, the purists being upset. This just seems like Truth seems like a great guy. He seems like, a locker room superstar back there. He's been a comedy character for quite a long time now. Although we didn't even say, well, Awesome Truth, obviously, our namesake.
yeah,
We're not paying him enough credit for that. He's part of the reason this show is called what it's called.
that's true. Yeah. I
So
mean,
he should be like, oh, he should be more of our hero than he probably is. But
but we only talked about Awesome Truth like formally on this podcast like twice.
yeah, we've really ignored the concept of Awesome Truth. But Our Truth, he's half that. And so, but yeah, he's beyond the occasional Awesome Truth run, really. He's mostly a comedy character. And he's, known certainly most frequently in the last like 5 years or so for the 24/7 title, which is what this episode of Table for Three is about. It's from 2022. It's Truth, it's Carmella, and it's Dana Brooke. And they're basically talking about the 24/7 title and, the idea and holding it and like how silly it was and all that kind of stuff. And as you said, it's really just a place for Truth to be wacky and funny and surprise them and just generally be a good time. And like it really does come through. Like it's the most bare bones topic that they don't stay on to consistently anyway. And it's mostly him just being wacky and having like bits set up in advance, like lots of fruit, and everybody really seeming to enjoy how odd it all is.
Yeah. So the table of three concept, let's break that down for like half a second. But it's effectively just three people talking. It's like a video podcast almost, where
Yeah.
without a host, they just start talking about things. It's usually, I mean, my assumption is it's usually themed around three wrestlers or performers or people in wrestling that have something in common. And in this case, it was like the 24/7 title. I imagine they're not all about like low card, mid card talent. Like a lot of
No,
it's like JBL and
one I was
Taz.
going by, yeah, was Bischoff, Pritchard, and JBL, I think, and it was like friends and foes sort of thing. So I think it was
Oh,
like
I would
talk.
have to watch that episode to figure out what that
Yeah.
actually means.
I think a lot of them are just like they find three people and they say you all are about this. Like there's one with Teddy Long, Ron Simmons and JBL too, and they talk about APA.
Right.
It's like 15, 20-minute episodes. They're all just talking about one topic. Like you said, it's like a mini bites podcast, but with actual, the faces of people you probably know.
They never made this an actual podcast, right? Because they
I
could
don't
literally rip the
believe
audio
so.
and just put it on like Stitcher or Apple Podcast.
Yeah, or like just do. I'm sure they have way more footage than 20 minutes too. So and sometimes they could probably release like an 45 minute to an hour conversation. But I don't know. Maybe they weren't monetizing podcasts. I don't even know. Does WWE that involved in podcasts officially these days? Like I truly am not aware of a ton of moves they've made as a company to do podcasts.
I don't. I mean, I'm sure they do. I just
And I know
don't
there's
listen.
always
I
like
don't
like
listen to
Austin
that
like they always
shit.
there's so many wrestlers who do them obviously now and so many people who are sometimes involved in Pritchard in particular. Like it seems like they have their tendrils in a lot of things, but I don't know how many of them actually make them in particular money.
It feels like a missed opportunity. I mean, like AEW does that shit. Like, why
Yeah.
wouldn't WWE?
They
Like,
have I mean if there is probably Sam Roberts or some shits involved. So maybe
yeah,
that's
right.
maybe that's why we don't know about it is
Oh,
cuz who cares about that?
right. Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean. I'm sure it exists. I just would never listen to that iteration of whatever the fuck this is.
And nor should we. But you are right. This would be a good format. And it would be the variety would be great too, because if you don't have a great host or a great hook, and what they could say is, well, we don't have that, but what we have is different people every time under contract to us telling stories. Like that would be kind of fun. I would like that because it's a different sort of voice every single episode.
Yeah, and in this case too, because like, not that I really wanted to hear all of the like behind the scenes stories of Dana Brooke's career or like about the 24/7 title. Like this episode in particular felt just like a platform for Truth to kind of show off just why he's entertaining. And because his castmates were Carmella and Dana Brooke, so who aren't necessarily known as like the greatest entertainers
Yeah,
or
or the best
performers.
talkers. They're not hired for their promo skills.
Yeah, and so Truth is just like doing like laps around them for like 30 minutes, which I found pretty entertaining. But yeah, I mean, like the 24/7 title, it's like I was reminded how ridiculous this whole thing was and like all the crazy get-ups and scenarios, but it was just like effectively like the roll-up league. It's like how many
Yeah.
times can we do a roll-up
Yeah.
and
Can we roll up Gronk? Can we roll up, people in costume? Like, yeah, it was just endless roll ups.
so
Do you know
so
who the
so
final? Do you know who the final champion was? The final 24/7 champion. I don't know why you know this. It would be insane. It would pretty much be if you look it up.
is he or she a
It's a she.
full-time
It's a female wrestler. She's still on the roster, but you'd be forgiven if you forgot that because I don't think she does anything of consequence.
I'm gonna have to think about this.
All right, you think about it during the episode, and it was retired in November 9th, 2022. So some soonish after this episode. So this episode sort of ruined was the beginning of the end apparently for the 24/7 title, which
Yeah,
is
the
fair.
legacy.
It went on for 3+ years. I mean, they got a lot of mileage out of a pretty stupid idea. So kudos to them for that, I guess.
Yeah, and sadly, it's like our Truth will always will be remembered for this thing.
Hmm.
If you remember this thing, the 24/7 title exists. Because when
Yeah.
you do, you'll remember that he was like the face of it.
It was.
But
And you shouldn't remember or think about it in any real way. But yeah, it was a great use of a guy that otherwise would have just become a jobber, or a backstage appearing dude. And instead he got a belt basically all to himself and a segment almost every week. And it was a really good idea if you're going to try and create content, and then in our stupid era, it is a good idea for like a video or to get celebrities involved or whatever. Like just have a sort of throwaway title that they can all mess around with and it'll cut well into 30-second clips.
yeah, I think that the Gronk scenario was probably the height of this stupid thing where
Yeah.
you're gonna see it on ESPN and or something. You know, the whole classic, like, oh, you're gonna be on the Today Show and see clips of the It's like, who cares a shit? Like, that
Yeah.
doesn't. How many tickets is that going to sell for anything?
Yes. It's one of those things. I mean, it's funny because that's the kind of thing that what Pritchard would always say is like, oh, publicity. But it's like, in what way is this actual publicity that you can point to as making you money? You know, like I get that it's better to be on TV than not, but also like there's no way anyone bought a ticket for a show because of this stupid stuff. You know?
No, definitely not. I mean, exactly. It is. These were characters and people like Tozawa was like a 24/7
Yeah.
champion 5 billion times. It's like
Did you know the Revival had the belt once upon a time?
I believe that.
They both pinned our truth at the same time. Wow. I'm looking at
Uh,
like the who's right now. It's a lot of.
oh,
It's a lot.
Alexa Alexa Bliss is my guess, by the way.
That Alexa Bliss. Oh, the sheet. No, it's not Alexa Bliss. That's a good guess, but that is
It's
incorrect.
not Naya.
I don't think Alexa Bliss even ever had the belt, did she? I think she was
Oh
above
man.
this. No, she might have. Yes, she did. She had it
She
a couple
did? Wow.
times. No, just maybe once. She had it. Do you want to know who it is? You want me to tell you?
Yeah, just tell me.
Nikki Cross.
Oh,
Nikki
she is
Cross.
still with the company.
Nikki
Yeah.
Cross defeated Dana Brooke on Raw in November, and then she threw it in the trash, and that was it. So she Alundra
Wow.
blazed.
Wow. We're gonna remember. Yeah, we're gonna parallel that one again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she's still on the roster. Obviously, she's in the stupid Wyatt thing now. So
Has the white thing even been a thing?
yeah, I just read about it. They're still doing the Wyatt thing. Everyone hates it now. Apparently, it's a disaster. So
Right.
that thing
Oh,
we said several years ago is absolutely coming to pass, or a year ago, whatever it was, but about it being a bad. But
okay. Fair enough. Anyway,
yep,
well, if the 27 title was around, maybe they would be.
yeah,
But
they could stick Bo if it doesn't work out. They could always just send Bo back, yeah, down there to the graveyard of this belt.
yeah. But so watching this, not to go into the lore of the 24/7 title, it's hard not to. But
Like you said, it's Truth's legacy in a lot of ways, his recent legacy at least.
he spent the better half of like you said earlier, Awesome Truth was for 2013,
Yeah,
2012.
I believe so. That
Like, that was
sounds
a
right.
long time ago. That's like 13 years ago
And they had
when
that
he
title
was raw.
run, what, a couple years ago at Mania? They won the belt sort of as like a remember these guys, thank you kind of a thing. But yeah, it was quite
Yeah.
a long time ago. Decade plus for sure.
Yeah, because I have like flashbacks to when it's funny because Truth is feuding with Cena sort of now, and it's like I remember when he was feuding with Cena back when Cena was a regular performer, and that was like 2013, 12, and he was dressing up as he's just turned like crazy R-Truth, which then became like his character for like a decade.
Yep.
And he was dressed up as a Confederate soldier, talking about little Jimmy and all that shit. And it's just for me, it's like R-Truth went from that to like last week.
Yeah.
And then there's just a lot of just like there's a lot of fond memories of this guy performing because he's like really like lovable, but it wasn't relevant to the greater picture. Like the biggest thing in consequence he didn't let like before this whole Cena thing and the belt, I guess winning the belt, the tag belts, which I would argue is less relevant than this, is when he had this what his face to face with like Lesnar a few years ago, where everyone was like, "Oh, they should have a match because that'd be great."
Yeah, it does. It does seem like every now and then someone would they would do something with Truth, or Truth would do something he said like vaguely memorable in his general comedy area, and someone would say, "Hey, they should like they should let him do a real thing for a second, you know? Like
Yeah,
they should let him because Awesome Truth when it was working, which was not like you said that long, and obviously they neutered it pretty hard at a certain point, but like they were a legitimate threat. Like the whole storyline there was they are threatening the WWE with their with their aggression and their wrestling skills. Like that was so like there was a second there where they tried to pretend like these guys are scary, which is
yeah,
funny to think about now. But like that was a main event angle for a few months.
yeah. I mean, and granted, like the Miz, when was the last time that guy touched the main event? But
Yeah, you asked me before we started, did Miz get fired yet? And I was like, I don't think so officially, but we're all keeping our eyes out for it.
yeah, right. The fact that those two last as long as they did, I guess now doing this whole retrospective is kind of hilarious. It's kind of like a miracle that they were still with the company up until like last week.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. Like but they survive because, like, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. Like, it's the kind of thing that football and baseball, like every sport to a certain extent, maybe basketball a little less because you have smaller rosters, but they're just like, I mean, Miz was always like a guy you could throw out there and get spit on or beat up by a celebrity or whatever. So he had that sort of area cornered. And then Truth just seemed like he was like a good locker room guy, you know? Like he was just a good, wily veteran to have around who was everyone liked him and he's been there forever and just he just had that sort of energy. And like there is, I understand that they're a big corporation now and they're going to cut costs where they can because that's how this works, but I can see like it's almost whatever he's making, like how is that not worth it just to keep everybody having a good time and keep morale high? Like there is absolutely value in that. Like value is not intrinsically tied to gets good rating on random, appearance on Raw or SmackDown. Like there's value in just being a helpful employee of the company and a good dude.
Yeah, and how much was this guy possibly making where he was deemed too expensive? I mean,
Yeah.
maybe it's relative to his like value in the actual like card every week, but the guy made every week. He was there every week and
Yeah.
he would fill 3 to 5 minutes of content. You know, I don't know how much they were paying for that, so it's hard to really put a value in a number. But like, guy was there every week, and it makes me really think. With his quote unquote comedy angle, like, is that something where he was fighting every week to be more relevant to do that, or was he kind of just like, he's not young. He's like, yeah, I'll not take you. You're telling me you're going to pay me all this money. I'm going to show up every week. I'm going to entertain the shit out of people and make people laugh, which he did. And I don't think back bumps. Like
Yeah.
maybe I don't know like where like the competitive nature of a wrestler begins or ends, and then like the comfort of like having a steady gig on TV like this begins.
Yeah. And I mean that's interesting sort of take in just knowing what we know about wrestling, and knowing how some people look at the business. I'm sure there are people out there who would make that argument, like this guy's not even giving you 10 minutes in the ring. This guy's not even taking bumps for you. Like that's not value. That's not this that is the to be a wrestler is to do that. And what he's doing is not wrestling. But you and I, as amateur wrestling historians and people who have watched and begrudgingly watched and now do not really watch the show, like there is such a value in killing time. Like I would say one of the things wrestling shows do more than anything is kill time. Like fill time, kill time, make 2.5, 3 hours. Like they have part of they make literal content for television stations, and the goal is to produce that every single week. Till infinity, until the world burns up. That's their job. And so having guaranteed 5, 7, whatever minutes from a entertaining personality every week, that should be like gold to most people. Like that is just knowing that 7 minutes you do not need to worry about. Like they should have treasured that with all their hearts.
Right. Yeah, because that adds up after a decade of 5 minute
Yeah, for
segments.
sure. Yeah, oh, you didn't get 12 minutes from like Dolph Ziggler. Like, well, whatever. You got a better 7 minutes from a guy who's way more entertaining. Like, maybe it's not exactly what you want from wrestling, but maybe this is what wrestling is now, for better or worse.
Yeah, and I also wonder just how much writing needed to be done because, like, the part of it is I don't know where improv and truth being entertaining ends and a writer writing jokes for him begins, but also just like I clearly don't know the beginning and ending of a lot of things for wrestling. But what I also speculate about too is, when you have a character that's so locked in like this, it almost becomes very easy to kind of just say, "Oh, truth is in this situation. He's in the room with Brock Lesnar. What's he going to say? Oh, this is clearly and you could kind of throw once you have a character that's so well defined, you kind of just throw them into any scenario, and it just writes itself to some degree.
Yep.
And I feel like that makes everybody's lives easier. If you're a writer for a segment like that, that's great. If it's if it's if Truth is improving, he just clearly has enough trust and he has it down where he knows what he's going to say, and it's going to be like kind of smirk inducing to like literal laughing.
Yeah.
So it's but that becomes that's a tough thing to achieve in just any medium, let alone wrestling.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, you're right that we don't know where it all where the quote unquote comedy comes from. You know, like, meaning is he making it up off his head, or are they telling him what to say? But as you noted, it is most of these people on these shows, their skill is not in comedy. You know, their skill is not being funny. And Truth is just has a vibe at him, and he's funny just by existing. You know, like the table for three. To loop back to the thing we are ostensibly discussing, he's not like telling jokes with a capital J. You know, like he's more just doing weird shit and being funny and like interesting. And but it just makes you laugh, and it's like when I see that, it reminds me of how bad everyone else is on the show at doing that. You know, like so even if he's not, even if someone is helping him get the stuff, like he's delivering it in a manner, a successful manner, which is a skill that none of his coworkers really share. Like they, at
Yeah.
least not in an objective sense. Vince, I'm sure, thinks some of the shit that happens to them, or Vince used to find comedy in the weirdest things. But like, I would say most people would objectively say, if you had to say, all right, is anyone, or is any wrestler funny? It's like, well, Truth, and then a huge gap, and then maybe you could find somebody else. But like, really, just he's the only one who I think had that skill as a performer.
Right. But you can even see it like so in the table for three example, they cite this like Carmel gives this anecdote of when they were doing fan signings and stuff, and they're at this convention and he's talking to all these fans, and just you get like, I don't know, 20 seconds. You sign, you say something, you do take a picture, and you move, then just rinse and repeat for like hours.
Mhm.
She was just like, yeah, he would the entire day, every time someone would say something like monotonous or kind of innocent, or just like a very objective thing, like, oh, I saw you at this event, or I did this thing, and oh, you inspired me to do this, he would respond to everyone and go, oh, that's odd. And I'm just like, that's really funny.
For his own comedy, for the comedy of people like sitting next to him, you know, that's the only ones, the only people who knew what he was doing.
So it seems like this guy was trying bits out, still really enhanced, but was still like in the quote unquote brand guidelines of like what is our truth character. But like he was exploring this outside of Raw, and like in real life. So it's like clearly this guy has something. He's very entertaining, and I think at some point he was a good wrestler, but it's been so long since he's had a match longer than 3 minutes that it's hard to really say that. And now he's 50, so like,
Yeah.
what are we really expecting from like a resurgence and like a character change? But it's interesting that they're doing it. It's interesting that they're trying something with him, and it's interesting that it's like tied to John Cena. So
Yeah, and like I think it's what's really good about it too. Like obviously, I'm glad because he seems like a good dude. I'm glad he gets one more like I'm glad he got to feel this groundswell of enthusiasm, and he gets one more little run here. That's all fantastic stuff. But also, in so many, we've seen versions of this before. Like weird semi-retirement thing. Like old guy gets one match, and like let's say for example, like it seems like one of the things they're sort of doing is like they're pulling back the veil for lack of a term. And like I've read he's called Ron Killings now and R-Truth. Like they're allowing like it's probably gonna be something where it's like Ron Killings is his serious persona now, and like
yeah.
R-Truth is him being like that's what I was when I was goofy, but now if I'm gonna wrestle John Cena for real, Ron Killings is gonna wrestle John Cena, which is fine, whatever, and that's his real name, so great. But there's a world where this happens, and and he sticks around for 6 months too long, a year too long after, and like it just becomes a nothing, like he becomes Ron Killings, and he gets this little run with Cena, and everyone goes, yay. And then people do forget about him, or the show forgets about him, and he's on main events pretending to be serious as Ron Killings, and everyone's just like, yeah, like I'm glad that hopefully this is like literally going to be a month or two, and he'll get to do a few more stuff, and then he'll just ride off into the sunset and gets like a little bit more of a payday and a little bit more of a rub on the way out. Like I'm just glad, I'm glad it's trending this way, and I'm hoping this is how it works out for him, is he gets to leave on his terms without like having to appear on the C-level shows with some new aggressive persona that is in not what we want from him and not what anybody wants to see, and just gets ground into the ground because everyone forgets about it and it becomes a nothing.
It's kind of like Stardust, right? I mean, Stardust was like a one-time thing. It felt like a one-time thing that then just like dragged on and on and on, and then it became like Cody's main persona, and then with a heel turn, it's just like
And became an
this.
extreme albatross around his
This
neck.
was a one-off. This is a one-off that we've dragged on for months, and to the point where the crowd softened so much on this guy that like he fucking just left. He's like, I don't want to even be here anymore. So, I mean, maybe it's apples and slightly different apples, but
Yeah, it's green and red apples, but still, it's apples. I think.
you're right. I think that Ron Killings, unless like I'm wrong and everybody wants to see this guy like fight for the title every week for it, yeah, you're right. He's
At
destined to
age
be like
53, yeah.
he's destined to be on main event, and then it's like, well, this is a nice try, but like it doesn't have to be. Like, this could just be a very short term thing, and that's totally fine
Yeah,
for
I'm
me.
sure it. I imagine it will be. It just makes sense, And like for all of H's, we've said this many times before in the last couple of years. For all of H's still flaws as a booker and all that, I think he understands timelines of things a lot better. Like I think he knows some things he extends forever, and they do have the legs, and some things they put them to bed quicker than I think Vince would. And I think this is a great example of something where it's like I think they're going to see there's a little more, blood from this stone, and then Truth's going to get to leave, and everyone's going to get to the fans get to feel like they did something by getting loud and keeping him around. When in reality, it's probably because the wrestlers were sad and we're like, hey, give Truth a little bit more of a rub, and they gave him a little bit more rub. Everyone's happy, and like you said, but the main thing is, it's nice to be able to take a step back and say, this guy's a hell of a performer. Like he really is. Like he's got something that a lot of other wrestlers don't have. And if he is leaving, that's the one thing that will stink is to lose that sort of persona and to have just to not have a true comedic talent really on the roster at this point. Have to see like fucking Seth Rollins like cracking jokes, like the least funny gooberish man in the world. Like,
Yeah.
is Seth Rollins going to become the funniest? Seth Rollins and Miz, are they the quote unquote comedians of Raw and SmackDown now? Like who else? Who
If
else
that's a
tells
question for me,
jokes?
the answer is I sure fucking hope not.
But they're the people I think of when I'm trying to think of like who else is quote unquote funny on the roster, and I'm like,
Like
I don't think
Otis.
anybody. Yeah, Otis, I guess. Like Otis is fat, I guess. Is that
Right,
funny?
that's the
Like,
comedy is he's a fat guy.
he's not even that. I mean, fat. He's really strong too. He's not even that fat. He's just wrestling fat.
I mean,
But
Chad Gable was until he got rid of the shush and became like Americano or whatever. So
yeah, and is that funny? I don't really think it's funny. It's like
it's just ridiculous.
yeah. But like I honestly I feel like Seth is going to be ugh. And like if that's what the other end of funny is, like that just makes me sad for the future of this show. For people who sit down and watch 5 hours of this a week, God help them if like they're gonna lose one of the true good performers of that ilk and all of a sudden the comedy falls to a guy like Seth Rollins. That's disappointing.
Right. I mean,
It's a
let's hope
it's a
that
loss. It's a
never
loss.
happens.
And luckily he's not. Seth Rollins is not our truth. But I just like I said, there's just he truth brought something and brings something that other people don't have, and it'll be fascinating in a depressing way most likely to see how if they want to turn to bits like this in the future, who they go to, who's their guy or girl. I don't know.
Question. But I will say that I do find it, I don't know if it's commendable is the right word, but it's interesting to see this regime, this creative, kind of take a chance like this because I think in the past, someone would just get let go and we would just like never talk about them again, or like they would just like run off into like the sunset with like a whimper. And this is interesting to see. Like it's Cena adjacent, like that's big like screen time, and it's a really bold choice to do this with a character that has for all intents and purposes a comedy character for over a decade. It's like I think that's I think that was interesting for them to take this chance. Like they didn't have to do this. They didn't have to do this at all. We could have just moved on to Punk Cena and there's no our truth. But like that boldness is what I really appreciate that. Like you had this guy, he's just sitting there, like no oh god, like yawn or nobody's like everyone's like oh this is kind of interesting. Like
Yeah.
so I appreciate that as someone who doesn't watch the product, but I listen to podcasts and I get
Stuff
recaps.
like this, I mean, if I was ever going to watch the product again, like in a consistent manner, it would be if stuff like this happened more consistently, like if because we've talked definitely on the show before, there's like they breaking away from the cycle of like we must build to every pay-per-view immediately after the next one, and every pay-per-view we must pretend like it is the most important pay-per-view ever since the last one. That's so exhausting and stupid. That's everyone knows that's not how it works. There should be off cycles. There should be little 2 week feuds. There should be random matches like this that, like, I know it's not happening in a pay-per-view, but like fine, even better. Build to a big Raw or a big SmackDown or a big Saturday night's main event. Like build to that. You use those things as your like endpoints of mini feuds. Like I'm totally fine with that. Like that is so much more interesting than just having every month to reset or extend something beyond its shelf life. You know, throw something weird like this in every now and then. Just keep us on our toes. Especially these days, no one gives a shit if you're like there's people that are going to watch no matter what. Like and you definitely, I think you stand to be more interesting and potentially get some lapsed fans back or whatever if you go off the beaten path and try something. Like, it's a good time to try.
Yeah, why not? Like make some money off this guy selling those shirts. To try something.
Oh,
Like
they start. I mean, I got an email. I still get. You probably get Adobe Shop emails too. Like I got it, the new Ron Killing shirt immediately after all this stuff went down. I'm like, great, good for Truth. Get a couple bucks. Like I said, sell more shirts. Like this is it writes itself if they want to go that way, and it's just so much more interesting than same old, same old. You know.
yeah, and we like Truth. I don't
We
there's
do.
nothing about him I don't like. So
No, not at all. And like you said, he's the name of the show. So
shit, if nothing else.
yep. Well, we'll see. We gave them a little praise for handling this right way. I believe that as of this recording, the next coming SmackDown will feature Ron Killings versus John Cena, which is probably the end of all this. Should probably be the end of all this. We'll see if everyone, goes along with that the correct way. But hopefully they will handle him well on his way out. And like we said, at the very least, I'm happy that he got to do a little bit more and didn't just disappear, like you said. They didn't just snap their fingers and say, "Oh, our Truth hasn't never been here. What are you talking about? It's not. He doesn't work for this company."
Right, and we'll see. We'll see what
Yes,
happens.
we will. But it was good ish. What do you think about Table for Three now that we watched? I mean, I've seen him before, but now that we're talking about it in the show, I think it's dead now. But would you ever go back and watch old Table for Threes beyond if we need to do it for the show?
I didn't hate my time watching this particular episode of Table 3. I don't know if they're all like this or it's entertaining, but like I enjoy myself. It just is a reminder of how entertaining our Truth really is.
Looks like there's one from 2015 with Miz, Truth, and Curtis Axel.
Whoa. What
Well,
the
so if
hell
you
could
want
those
to,
guys talk
oh
about?
man, three titans of the industry.
Shit, why didn't we watch that one?
Well, if we have to talk truth again, we know we have some other bullshit we can turn to. So,
Well, maybe we talk Miz. Maybe Miz comes back as
oh
Michael
yeah, well,
Mizani and
I have a
beats up
feeling
John Cena.
if they fire Miz out of nowhere, I do not think it would be a slightly shocking thing to do, but I don't think Miz is getting the same overwhelming support that Truth got.
No, probably not.
I think Miz, we'd be like, oh, Miz had a good run. That's probably the right thing to do is fire
Yeah.
him. So.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to hear us talk more about many, many other WWE Network documentaries and content things, shows of that ilk, you can find our archives at awesometruth.libsyn.com. You can also subscribe to us, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere podcasts are delivered, and listen to episodes old and new. Walt, good to talk truth with you. Good to have an excuse to talk about a guy. And like we said, I will not watch SmackDown on Friday, but I will certainly monitor what's happening out of curiosity to see if they do something smart and good here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get USA Network, so I physically cannot even watch this. So,
But
oops.
I will lurk, and like we said, like if the more they do things like this, the higher chances are that I at least watch like the next pay per view or whatever. Like they certainly in these off months they increase the chances that I will vaguely give a shit. So I don't know if that matters to anybody, but
Well, they'll get a YouTube view for me if I watch
yeah,
the next
there
Ron
you go.
Killings promo.
Although I guess they'll have to take it. It's the best they're gonna get. So
Yeah, they monetize my views, sort of.
thank you all so much for listening, and remember, the truth will set you free.